make two arguments based on the claims made by the opposition part. The first is the opposition keep pressing us about the efficiency of our policy because they think that those conservatives they will not accept this policy. But as our Prime Minister has pointed out, some of the situations or the status quo in those countries are so urgent that even if a small group of people accept this idea, we think it's a progress for their societies. Why? Because as these countries, women are in such a low social status. So we need to first let a group of men to get into the area to see exactly how bad the conditions of this women's situation is. So the importance is that we have to change the mindset from mindset of a man, because at this stage they do not know anything about the work that women has to take in their family life. So we think that the urgency is the most important thing, and that's why to let a group of people get in is a kind of progress to some extent. And second rebuttal is that they say it is they try to prove that these individuals must take actions, but we think that but we think that in the status quo, the room for women to act out is kind of difficult. So why? Because first, women already have some social movements in those countries that try to prove that themselves are productive and try to win respect from the society. However, those social movements they just are not recognized by those men. And those men, like especially in the Middle East countries, the women actually are illegal for those women to get out to have their voice spoken out in their societies. So we as a government, we think today the most important thing is to let men's idea change in their society instead of
All right, the peoples whose minds are going to change are people who have already changed to a certain extent, in other words, moderates. How can you persuade conservative people who already believe that women are inferior to accept this proposal, which seems to be the only method to change their perspective?
Yes, and here comes to my re-emphasize of the definition made by the Prime Minister. Like because the definition made by the Prime Minister is that we think those countries are generally the countries with very poor conditions. So in this, under such circumstances, those poor people, a large group of poor men will choose to be as house husbands. So this is a huge number of men, and even if you say that those modern people they tend to go to these ideas, we think that it is those modern people that we are trying to change their mind, because they are modern people, their mind are not extreme. So maybe in the neutral way they are not hostile to women. So those mind of the modern people are actually the easiest mind that can be changed. So we see that the group of modern people is kind of progress for the women's movement and for this rise of women's state social status, because extreme mind is very difficult to change, whereas the modern mind can be changed to some extent. So ladies and gentlemen, we see that in our scenario we are changing the mind of the man to we are changing the mind of men to raise the social status of women. In my constructive speech, I'd like to first prove to you why the man's mind can be changed, and second, why is that good for men, and third, why is that good for women and for the whole society. First, why the man's mindset can be changed, because we think that to pay for a house husband is not only a compensation for those men who choose to get work, but also to pay for the house husband is kind of to acknowledge that the house husband can actually act as a position for those men. So that it is a kind of productive thing, like following the logic made by the opposite side. We think that this kind of productive thing made by productive thing that men can do, because those countries with high gender gap, the men must get to work and women must stay at home. So let us analyze two groups of men in those kind of society. The first is that those men just are not capable to do other work when they step into society. And second is this man who actually they are modern, they are willing to be a house husband, but still has to go to work because of the stereotype, because under the scenario of the society that those kind of house husband work is actually a shame for them to do. So So we are actually freeing the men out of those stereotypes that they have to be strong, or they have to be strong, or they have to go out to get to work, and they can actually fulfill, and we think it's good. We think it is good for those men because those men they can actually free out of the stereotype to be strong, to be always strong. So step by step, we think that this situation can be no thank you. So we think that this situation can be changed because gradually. Because feminism is good for men as well, because men are no longer act as a kind of tool to get to job for the families. So we think that gradually it will be good for the men. So in the long run, the kind of motivation for those men to make a change still happens under this under our scenario. And secondly, is that we see it's good for women because it actually no thank you. It's good for women because we think that it is an opportunity for women to get to work. Because even if those women maybe are uneducated or they are not qualified to get to work outside, we still think it is a relief of their roles in family because. As we think that the household jobs, the household works in the family is actually it's very hard. It's very hard. That it requires a lot of energy, a lot of payments by the people who do the household work. So this can actually free women. Free women of the hardness to do those household jobs. So all of them, we have already proved to you that it's a very urgent thing to do. That even a small group of people's mind change is very important. And if not, the modern people we need to gain the support from them. And we've already proved to you that men that this also. It is both for men and women. So in the long run, it will have those men will have the incentive, have the motivation to make a change for the social status quo. So based on all of this, how to propose?
Next CPM, yellow please.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, throughout the entire two speeches coming from the affirmative side, what we hear is that there's a possibility that a very small minority might accept it. And suddenly the acceptance of this minority is going to fuel sudden social change, it's going to fuel women's emancipation, it's going to fuel gender equality in our society. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we accept their premise that some men might accept it. We also accept their premise that it could work as a financial and a concrete incentive for some men to become house husbands. But the problem coming from the government team's side is that they assume several missing links in that now it's suddenly going to somehow result in males understanding about the hardships that women feel. Now it's somehow going to result in females advancing into society and finding employment in society. They also make the assumption that somehow this is going to result in long-term equality. But that's something that our first speaker has already debunked completely. But on top of that, I'm also going to tell you why these assumptions don't work and how in fact it works contrary to how they wish it would work. Now on the first assumption on how some men might accept it, sure, but we've also told you how it creates the notion that house husbands working inside the home becomes an undesirable job that can be accepted only with a subsidy. And we've also told you how it would isolate and shun away moderates whose ideas and whose notions or incentives to work for these women can be now easily misrepresented, that they're simply following financial objectives. So this, at best, is a deadlock for them. But on top of that, we told you how understanding might not happen, right? Because we told you that some men might simply feel that, oh, this housework is something that I can do easily, right? I feel that these women have been overcompensated, or that, thank you, ma'am, or that these women have been whining about these kind of issues. And the bigger problem is that when these men find that it's in fact a hard job, and when they feel that houseworking is a bad thing, that something that they don't want to do, they're simply going to return back to their occupations, and they're going to force their wives back into that job in place of being housewives. And we think that's simply going to have no solvency whatsoever. And furthermore, she also talked about female advancements into society. society. And the second speaker's argumentation that female advancement will increase is that now they have more time and energy. But ladies and gentlemen, employment only happens when there's a demand for female employees. I'm going to further elaborate this in my extensions, but the problem is that even when we have more idle females within society, it's not going to directly translate into more female employment in society, ladies and gentlemen. And furthermore, about the issues of equality, now first of all, it principally violates feminist ideals on having a notion that male-centered change is the only way to change, but also it further strengthens the notion that female choices and female occupations within society are undesirable and lonely, which is why we think that also, for example, when it comes to female ideals, including choice feminism, cultural feminism, and radical feminism, goes against feminist ideals and also results in more inequality, which is something that was not responded to by the second speaker of the government side. But having cleared that, let me move on to the extensions coming from the deputy leader of opposition. Now I'm going to tell you, first of all, how it strengthens existing norms within the House, and secondly, I'm also going to tell you how it strengthens further gender discrimination, inequality within corporate settings and within companies. Now, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, what we need to really correctly assess is see the scenarios and cases of more gender equal societies and observe how they achieve change and how they achieve more equality in the long run. Now, what it does is that in most societies, we have a male-dominant society, and we see more increasing of females' advancements into society. And that first step of change is having working couples and dual employment of both males and females. It doesn't suddenly happen in a way that they switch roles. Why? Because society is not ready to accept that, and because couples are not ready to accept as well. But what it does is that this notion discourages the actual notion of having working couples and dual employment within the married couple. Why? Because it has an underlying premise that one person needs to work inside the home and one person needs to work outside the home and have a breadwinner. And we think that this notion, on top of your characterization of the status quo, in which there's a huge gender gap and huge gender stereotypes, when the government strengthens that notion that there needs to be a division of labor within the household, then obviously people on the losing side are going to be women. Now they're going to be discouraged from even having jobs as dual working couples. And we think that it strengthens the notion of patriarchy, it strengthens the notion of women staying at home while men become the active social members, which is in fact a big harm to long-term changes. So in an effort to bring about short-term changes, it's only going to make the stigma even worse. It's going to make the stereotypes even stronger. And having said that, now let me move on to the second extension about the corporal context. Now it's going to discourage female advancement into society in the first place. Why? Because it's going to result in disenfranchisement without preparation. Now, first of all, on top of the fact that nobody's going to take this deal in the first place, even when they take this option, most of these females are going to have an extremely hard time finding jobs in a male-centric organization, male-centric corporate world, and male-centric society. And therefore, what's going to happen is that now we're going to have financially unstable families. Now, because within the corporate sector, male obviously earn more than women, so now women as breadwinners will not be able to bring about the same kind of economic compensation. And on top of that, if you want to characterize the status quo or this house as a gender gap, huge society, a very chauvinistic society, then you really can't depend on the continuation of this policy in the first place. You never know when the next Trump, or when the next misogynist is going to come into power and get rid of this policy. So when there's a lack of a guarantee of a stability of a financial gaining coming from this income incentive, then what we see is that disincentivization of men to take this policy in the first place. And furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, it also justifies a bigger pay gap between males and females. Why? Because even in the status quo, we see a lot of, in terms of micromanagement levels, a justification of gender gaps between males and females. Now, males, because they don't need to pick up the kids from work, they work overtime because that's why they receive a higher pay. Or males, because they don't take maternal leave or menstrual leave, that's why corporates implicitly give males more pay. But now, under this policy, comparing a male worker and a female worker, the corporates also realize that although female workers, their husbands still get financial incentives from the government, but now the male breadwinner is the one that needs to support the family without a government stipend in the first place, which is why it also justifies existing corporate implicit behaviors of payment discrimination between males and females as well. And furthermore, when in a corporate society where companies and your clients expect a men worker to come to the meeting, when there's a financial incentive for corporates to send these, from governments to send these men to home. Now what corporations are going to do is that they're not going to replace them with female workers, they're going to match that incentive coming from the government and give higher pay to male workers, further incentivizing a bigger pay gap and increasing the relative poverty of women within society and increasing the wealth gap between males and females and further worsening the circumstances for women within society. Which is all in all, ladies and gentlemen, why we urge you, Mr. Speaker, to sign a negative ballot in today's debate. Thank you very much.
Thanks, DLO. Go.
Ladies and gentlemen, first, before I move to the main direction of this debate and move to the main problems of the debate, let me make three rebuttals to the opposition side. The first thing is that they say that housework is an easy thing for the women, but actually from our Prime Minister, we have proved to you that housework is not that easy, and actually it's the top level of the housework is a very hard job. And if they say that even if the man knows the difficulty